Hello and welcome to my top books read in 2021 list. This, unlike some people's lists, is not a top books published in 2021, but are just a top books that I happened to read in 2021. Some of these are 2021 releases, some of them aren't. Some of them are very old, some of them are relatively new, but still not 2021 releases. It's a whole mixture, but it is the books that I have enjoyed the most during this year. And that is my only consideration. I basically go through every book I read and decide which books I enjoyed the most. Some of these are 5-star reads, as you would expect. Some of these are actually 4-star reads, but I really enjoyed them, so they made it onto the list ahead of some of the 5-star reads that, although I appreciated them, I maybe didn't enjoy quite so much. So I think this makes for quite an interesting, varied list. There are some books which I knew would definitely be on this list before I started compiling it. There are some books which I had forgotten I'd enjoyed that much, and when I saw their names I was like, oh yeah, definitely one for the list. There are 10 books, but apart from the first one, which I'm going to talk about at the very start, they are in no particular order. They're not even in the order I read them, they're just in the order that Goodreads showed them to me when I downloaded the CSV of all my books to go through. So yeah, I'll tell you number one and then the rest, shrug. I'm not going to put them into an order. I don't think it's important. I also don't think it's 100% fair because I am rating purely on enjoyment, and also I think it's best to evaluate books for what they are, what they're trying to do, what the author was trying to achieve, what they're meant to be, not necessarily against each other, because you could be comparing a work of absolute beauty, literary genius, with a book that's maybe more shallow but more fun in a way. And yeah, to me it's about, does it succeed at the genre that it's meant to be, not is it the greatest book of all time. You know, I think that is more important personally. As a reviewer, I try to review books what they're aiming to be, rather than against all books ever, because I don't think that's a fair contest, and I also don't think that's possible. It's, you know, you wouldn't pretend a literary fiction book was trying to be a fun romance. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Why would you compare the two on the same scale? So without any further explanation, let's get into my top list. So the first book on this list I knew was going to be number one. I think as I was reading it, I thought it might be number one, and when I finished it I was like, yeah, I honestly can't see anything beating this book for me this year. It's just spectacular, and that book is, drumroll please, The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I have this beautiful Illumicrate edition with this lovely vine along the edges. Oh, I just love this book so much. I think what enhanced my reading experience was also doing the read along in the Illumicrate Discord, but I think even without that I would have just adored it. I think it is just outstanding. It's fantastic. It's a Indian inspired epic fantasy set in a empire which is kind of struggling to keep control of all of its constituent states. There's a princess who's been imprisoned because she won't die in a fire like her brother wants her to, as a kind of sacrificial emblem of something. There's a woman with powers who's been masquerading as a servant. There's this whole history of atrocities and history of hope and people coming together and people fighting each other. There's so much politics and amazing battle scenes, and the magic is just fabulous. I enjoyed this so much. I hadn't read an epic fantasy book in so long, and when I started reading this I just got so absorbed into the story immediately. I loved everything about it, and I'm so looking forward to reading the sequel. It's just completely gorgeous, and it made me want to read more epic fantasy, which I always feel is a great sign. If a book makes you want to read not only more by that author but more of that genre, it has done very, very well. So yeah, that's my number one, The Jasmine Throne. I adored it. So, on to the rest of the list. My favourite non-fiction book of the year, I don't think I read that much non-fiction, but this is number one, was Beginners, The Joy and Transformative Power of Lifelong Learning by Tom Vanderbilt. Now, I have a few issues with this book. It's written from the point of view of someone very wealthy who can pay tutors to help him all the time. But you have to kind of look past that. And take away from it the really useful advice that it contains about learning. Basically, it's a non-fiction book where there's also kind of like a bit of a memoir. It's kind of, it's like non-fiction kind of directed by what the author wanted to explore himself. So he learns various different new things, and he meets teachers of those particular fields, and he also talks to people who study learning to basically understand how adult learning works, how we can do it better. There's some great tips here if you're really interested in learning things. More sort of like craft or practical skills rather than things like learning a language. I think that is something best kind of delved into separately. He doesn't cover that kind of thing. But he talks about chess, singing, drawing, surfing, something else, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book, and I would recommend it if you are interested in the subject of lifelong learning. Next up on the list is The Midnight Lie. This was an Illumicrate edition, I think from last year. Let me have a look. Yeah, this is an Illumicrate edition from 2020 that I decided to read kind of randomly, I think. Been trying to catch up on some of my past Illumicrate books I hadn't got around to. And oh my god, I enjoyed this so much. So I haven't read the Winner's Curse series by the same author, but I absolutely have to now, and I want to read it before I read the second one of this. I actually have The Hollow Heart, which I also bought in the matching Illumicrate edition right here, but I haven't got around to reading it yet because I want to read the Winner's Curse series so that I understand the world a bit more, because I went into this not knowing anything about it, and I know that there are references and kind of callbacks to that previous trilogy, so yeah, I want to read that before I read the sequel, but I am really excited for it. I just found it really gripping. I couldn't put it down. It's about a young woman who lives in a city that's kind of been divided into three. So there are the Kaikif, who live in luxury. There are the Half-Kif, who live kind of in the middle and can move between the three worlds. And there are those who live in the Ward, who are at the absolute bottom of society, where they have laws that prohibit them from basically having pretty much any fun, wearing anything ornate, or in colours that they're not allowed to wear. You know, they have to do all the hard work. She lives with her guardian, who is kind of a bit of a crime lord, but doing it for the good of the people. She creates kind of like fake passports. And then one day, Miriam, the protagonist, gets into trouble. She gets put into prison, and she is right next to this stranger from a different land, someone who's come from a different country, who doesn't really understand why things are the way they are, and they get to know each other and go exploring, and yeah, mysteries abound, things are explored. The romance and the drama are just so gripping. I loved it so much. Next up is Rescue Me by Sarah Manning, which I don't have a hard copy of. I keep meaning to buy the hardback and forgetting. Really must get around to that before it's impossible to get hold of. But yeah, Rescue Me by Sarah Manning. Oh my god, so cute. And also really deep and moving at the same time. So Rescue Me is basically about a man and a woman who decide to co-parent a dog. They kind of almost get into a fight over the dog before this is agreed, and basically they each have her for part of the week and then they swap over. But there are various issues with this dog. She's a rescue, and they have to work together to kind of help her. And at the same time they get to know each other and they start to fall for each other, but neither of them thinks the other one is right for them. They have all of these issues that they need to work through, and I feel like I'm massively oversimplifying it, but you'll just have to take my word for it. This is a really layered, moving, powerful, book that's, yes, it's a romance, but it's also a family drama and about how people see themselves and their expectations for life and so much else. Of course, it's also about a very good dog. So yeah, definitely one of my favourite Sarah Manning books ever. Next up is A Spoonful of Murder by Robin Stevens, which is the 7th, I think, in the Murder Most Unladylike like mystery series. This one came out a few years ago now. Yeah, 2018. 2018, wow. But it took me a while to get around to it. I've been catching up on previous books in the series, so yeah. Anyway, I thought that First Class Murder was my favourite of the series, and then this one came along and blew it out of the water. I just loved it so much. So in this one, Daisy and Hazel are 1930s boarding school girls, and detectives go to Hazel's home in Hong Kong after her grandfather dies. Turns out that Hazel has a surprise waiting for her, and then a murder occurs. Which of course they have to solve. But it wasn't actually the mystery that was the thing I loved most about this book. What I loved most about this was the historical setting in Hong Kong. I didn't know anything really about Hong Kong at this time, and it was just fascinating. It was brilliant learning about the culture and the expectations, and also the emotional journeys are really, really strong. So Daisy is usually the more confident one of the two. She's comfortable in every situation, but here she's a bit of a fish out of water. She's not familiar with what's going on, and kind of Hazel, I think, is also more aware of Daisy's difference being in Hong Kong, because Hazel is Chinese, and Daisy is a white upper class English girl. And I also loved Hazel's journey as she goes from really resenting her family and the new situations that she's been putting, and kind of railing against her father, at least in her head. She's very respectful on the surface, but she's very kind of disappointed in him, really. And yeah, it just made this book have so many layers and so much depth, whilst also at the same time being a really fun middle grade mystery. So yeah, I loved it. Next up is Trumpet by Jackie Kay. This book was just, it was just fabulous. It blew me away. It's about the aftermath of the death of a legendary jazz trumpeter, Joss Moody, who was actually a woman living as a man, and nobody except for his wife knew this, not even their son. It's really, really interesting in the way that it explores gender, because you don't get to hear from Joss himself. You only hear from his wife, from his son, from the other people in his life, and their impressions of him and their own thoughts on gender, which means that you get a whole load of kind of diverse impressions and experiences, but at the same time, you know, you haven't got the full picture, and that is a really interesting contradiction to hold in your head while you read the book. And it's just beautifully written. Jackie Kay is a poet. I've read some of her poetry before, and it's just gorgeous. I loved reading it. I couldn't put it down. I'm sure it's one I will go back to. I should note that the description of the main character's gender in the blurb, which is kind of where I got the description from, it's a bit dated. In the book, I don't think it comes across as dated, but maybe if the blurb has been written today, it will be described in a different way. Josh's gender identity, I mean, they might be described as they might have just been described as a trans man. I don't know. This is an edition from 2011, and I don't think there have been any updated blurbs posted on the internet. So you have to take the back with a pinch of salt. In the actual book itself, it's much more complicated than that. It's really unclear what way Josh identified. His wife refers to him as he throughout. So yeah, that's another interesting aspect to the book. Next on the list is another book from a few years ago, although much more recent than Trumpet, which was first published in 1998, and that is Where'd You Go Bernadette by Maria Semple. This is published in 2012, and is a kind of exploration of relationships and family relations and motherhood and the expectations on mothers and how that can be really toxic and stifling. So basically it's kind of presented as a compilation of evidence put together by Bernadette's daughter B to investigate why her mother disappeared as she tries to track her down and work out where she is. The evidence is so entertaining. There are emails back and forth between different characters that B somehow got hold of and put together. There are notes, there are letters, there's kind of B's own interjections and tellings, and it was just gripping. I couldn't put it down, and it wasn't even so much the mystery, it was just that the emails are really funny, the way the story was put together was really entertaining. I loved it. Next up is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. Another book that I could not put down. I just found it so interesting and I'm really looking forward to reading the sequel. So An Absolutely Remarkable Thing is about a woman who one night on the way home from work sees this giant robot sculpture thing, and she's like, oh wait, what is this? I've never heard about this before. Maybe I can get a scoop here. And she rings her friend who runs a YouTube channel, and he comes down, he shoots some footage of her with the robot. They go home, he edits the footage, uploads it. Next day she wakes up and it turns out now she is famous because all these robot sculpture things have showed up in different places across the world, and she was the kind of the first person to go and talk about them. And so she kind of ends up spearheading this campaign to find out what's going on, and to kind of direct the public conversation about them, which she kind of does for her own personal gain. There's a lot in here about like the ethics of being a kind of content creator, of trying to lead conversations, of trying to claim space in this kind of sphere, about the ethics. You know, she insists throughout that she's doing it for good, that she wants the best for the world, but also she benefits from it hugely personally, which makes it very complicated. And then of course there's also the mystery about the absolutely remarkable things themselves, and what's going on there. Are they aliens? Is there some kind of like secret weapon plan going on from some country? We don't know. And she's trying to find out, and everybody's trying to find out. Some people are eager, some people are wary. It just seems so realistic and believable, but also hopeful at the same time. And yeah, the ending, oh my god, the ending. Anyway, I love this, as I'm sure you can tell, and it is on my top books list after all. So yeah, there we go, that's that one. Next up on the list is Gideon Knife by Tamsin Muir. This book is really difficult to describe. I've seen quite a few people describe it as like a locked room mystery with necromancers and skeletons, which is probably the best way to describe it. Basically, the protagonist, Gideon, is a kind of servant of this kind of aristocratic family who run a planet and kind of worship death, and the kind of heir to the family place in society. Harrow is summoned to go off on this whole weird quest thing that the Emperor has commanded her to go, and she has to go and meet with all of these other representatives of the other houses on this other planet, and Gideon gets roped into going with her and serving as a cavalier. And then they get there, it's weird, murders happen, mysteries abound. Very strange book. Narrative style is so idiosyncratic and weird and kind of filled with slang and kind of funny moments, but it's also kind of weirdly emotional and about friendship and building relationships and connections and life getting in the way and your situation getting in the way, and that was really, really moving. So weird. I loved it. And finally on this list, and the last of these books that I read in 2021, is Whistle by E. Lockhart, which is a DC Comics kind of graphic novel in which a new superhero is created. It's written by Iloka, who is of course one of my favourite authors, and I just enjoyed it so much. The main character, Willow, is a kind of student activist. Her school, she's always trying to get people to sign petitions, and she goes to protests. And her mother is really ill. She has cancer. And they can't afford the treatment anymore. So she gets a job at a dog shelter, where she has a favourite dog, of course, who isn't actually in the shelter. He's a stray, but she gives him food. And then one day everything changes when she gets offered a job by her mother's long-lost friend, who's very estranged from her, so she has to keep this secret. And the job, unfortunately, is to run an illegal poker night. But she's really good at this. She's brilliant at it, and it brings in lots and lots of money that she can use to help fund her mother's cancer treatment, get new clothes. But then it turns out there's a darker underbelly to all of this. And then she has to make some difficult choices to juggle it all and do right by the people of her neighbourhood and her city. I just loved this so much. It was fascinating. I'd love to read more. It was just so good. I hope they make a sequel. Please, please, please. Because I really want to read more of this character and the other people in her world and the take on some of the Batman villains who appear in this. So good. Loved it. So there you go. That's my top books of 2021. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. If you would like to read more books but don't know where to start, check out my free e-course, Ignite Your Passion for Reading, Fall in Love with Books. And if you would like to read a quick novella to get your reading challenge for this year up to a great start, check out Unlucky in Lockdown, which is a novella that I wrote, which is linked in the description box below. You'll see me again soon. Bye!